Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 623. 623. Sunday. I believe it's the 2nd? Something like that. Alrighty. George H.W. Bush is dead. He died on Saturday. I'll just give you my initial thoughts, what went through my mind when I heard that news. First, I thought, well, one more deep stater gone. That's a good thing. I thought, well, I guess his soul is burning in hell right along with Senator Magoo for all the things, the naughty, naughty things that he has done. I could spend hours talking to you about the Bush family, going all the way back to Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, and their associations and all that they've been involved in. Then I thought, you know what? Maybe we'll finally get the last of those JFK files that Trump was going to release. But then he stopped short of releasing the last couple tranches. Many of us believe that that is because those last few tranches will show clearly that George H.W. Bush was a huge player, a major player, a key player in the assassination of John Kennedy. There is overwhelming evidence to that fact. I do not have time to go into it all now. Maybe some point I will, but not tonight, no time. And then I thought how ironic it was that George H.W. Bush would pass away on the very day that Trump is signing the new trade agreement, which some people are calling the new NAFTA, considering that it was George H.W. Bush that laid the foundation for NAFTA. Clinton's the one that signed it into law. He followed Bush, but that's only because Bush was bounced out after one term. He served one term and then he lost to Clinton in his re-election bid. Had he won, he would have been the one who would have signed NAFTA. But he lost, so Clinton signed NAFTA. But it was the groundwork for NAFTA was laid by George H.W. Bush. And it was a key part of George H.W. Bush's quest to really bring in the final push for the New World Order. And I'll never forget the day that I watched that speech that Bush was giving where he started talking about the New World Order and how he was happy to bring in this New World Order and that it would succeed. He's the first president I can remember that openly admitted to wanting a New World Order and wanting to be the person who implemented that New World Order. So it's very ironic that the day that George H.W. Bush dies, his horrible NAFTA deal that he laid the groundwork for died with him. And that Trump, on the very day that that deal dies, is having the signing ceremony with Mexico and Canada that would give us the new, much better trade deal that actually protects American jobs and American industry. I thought that was very ironic. And I guess the thing that I'll remember most about George Herbert Walker Bush, even more so than all his dirty dealings and his family's dirty dealings, whether it be 9/11, his association with the Bin Laden family, his business partnership with the Bin Laden family, his wanting to bring in the New World Order, his father's association with the Nazis, the Bush family's close association with Margaret Sanger and the Sanger people back in the 1930s. I guess the thing I'll always remember about George H.W. Bush is the South Carolina debate in 2015 when Trump and Jeb Bush got into that little scuffle, I guess, and at that point the camera went back to George H.W. Bush sitting there in the audience with Barbara, and he was looking at Trump and going, signaling, we're going to cut your throat off. I'm going to cut your head off, cut your throat. What's been happening since Trump won that debate and went on to capture the nomination? Pretty much this. And I guess what has troubled me the most and disheartened me the most in the past 24 hours is the same thing we saw with Senator Magoo, where they lavish all this praise upon him as being this great American, this great hero, this great president, this wonderful person, when so many of us know the history of both Magoo and H.W. Bush. And quite honestly, H.W. Bush's history and his family's history far, far worse than Magoo, because they're far more capable criminals. I mean, Magoo's an idiot. The Bushes are, well, George Herbert Walker Bush and his father, Prescott, were not idiots. Now, their kids are all idiots. Marvin, Jeb, W, they're all complete numbskulls. But Prescott Bush was a smart dude, very, very crooked, very criminal, very evil. George H.W. Bush, very crooked, very criminal, very evil. These were not stupid men, though, like their sons. And I guess I was most disheartened when I heard Trump's response from Buenos Aires when he said, yeah, well, the flag's going to be at half-mast for 3 days. We're going to fly his body into the Capitol. And the typical treatment that a president will get, especially a military veteran president. And I kind of understand where, Trump has to be a statesman and has to be above the personal stuff. And he has to say those sorts of things. But I thought he laid it on a little heavier than he needed to. And it's very disheartening that Trump has to even be in that position. But I do get the impression that for me, and a lot of people watch his channel, other YouTubers, I think in a lot of ways we are extremely angry with the deep state and for all the things we've seen going back to the Kennedy assassination, 9/11, and so many other things. Just it's a never-ending deluge of things that we have to put up with from these people for literally decade after decade after decade. And we desperately want to take these people down, and we think we must in order to save the republic. We think that we've got the right guy in there, and I do believe we do. I believe Trump's the best shot we've ever had at unraveling the deep state. But you get the feeling sometimes that, as I've said before, that our desires and our agenda is different than the desires and the agenda of Trump. I think Trump really wants to make the country great. And he would like to see the people who've tried to take him down. He would like to see those people held accountable because he thinks it's fair and that's the right thing to do. But I think his desire to succeed in his agenda is much greater than his desire to take down the deep state players. And I think for a lot of us, maybe it's not the same. I think for a lot of us, we're willing to throw the entire country into chaos in order to unravel the deep state. I know I am. If you told me and you said, okay, yeah, Trump's going to drop everything, Whittaker's going to drop everything, they're going to unravel this whole thing, but it's going to lead to total mass chaos in the country. It's going to turn the country inside out. There could be martial law. There could be this. Could be all sorts of horrible things that come out once the deep state is unraveled and all the crimes are exposed. It could be very, very traumatic for the country. I am the type of person who would say, let it rip. It's worth it. It's what we must do to reset the original idea of our framers. It's what we must do. It's what we must go through. And even if it causes major problems in the country for 6 months or a year, even if we have to have martial law, even if it causes civil disobedience, riots in the streets, it's worth it to save the country. That's what I would say. I think many of you would agree. But there's a side of me that believes that Trump doesn't see it that way. That Trump believes, yeah, these people went after me. I would really like to see them taken down for what they did, but not at the expense of the country. I would rather suck it up and move on, get on with my agenda, create jobs, cut regulations, fix the trade deals, do these various things that are good for the country. And although I'd like to see the people who went after me taken down for their crimes, if it's going to mean turning the country inside out and upside down, it's probably not worth all that for me to get, revenge or to get justice or whatever. So I think maybe Trump sees it that way. I don't know if he sees it the same way we do, that we think that something has to happen that will go far beyond Trump's presidency. Because the deep state will eventually get their guy back in there, probably very quickly, in the next election or as soon as Trump is taken care of. So I think we may see things differently than Trump. I hope I'm wrong, but that is my thoughts. I hear this argument. I know that Last Refuge at Conservative Treehouse, who I like a lot, has been making this argument, the leverage argument. Trump's using all this as leverage, and I can certainly appreciate where he would, because that's exactly what Trump does. He's the master of using leverage. Typically, it's in using leverage as in terms of his brand, pulling other people's money together, using other people's money to get deals, bringing people together to get deals, using leverage. But in this case, it would be using what he has on the criminals to get leverage to get what he wants. Now, I would buy into that, and to some degree I do, but I would buy into it a lot more if I actually saw that in play. For instance, Trump wants what? He wants a solution to the border crisis, and he wants the wall, wants the funding for the wall. If Trump's using this leverage so much, then why doesn't he just call Pelosi and Schumer into his office and say, look, I can declassify all these documents. I can tell Mr. Whittaker to launch a special prosecutor, and we can unravel the entire Spygate right here, right now. And when it's all said and done, it will practically destroy the Democratic Party and many of the high-level people, as well as all your friends in the deep state. The Right Reverend Clinton and many other people who were involved, Democrats in the Congress, some of them named Mark Warner on the Senate Intelligence Committee. We could unravel a lot of things. It could be very, very damaging to your party, Nancy, Chuck. But I want my border wall. So I'm willing to stuff that in my pocket and sit on it and not do anything with it if you'll get me the Democrat votes I need to get the full funding for my border wall in this next bill coming up. What do you say? Have we got a deal? But I'm not seeing that happen. Just my thoughts. John Solomon was on Sean Hannity. And he said that on Monday we're going to learn about a brand new whistleblower regarding the Clinton Foundation that no one's ever heard of before. And that this is going to be the story that's going to be breaking on Monday about this new whistleblower. And he suggested that this whistleblower was, we don't know the exact details, whether he came forward or they went to him or exactly how that works, but Solomon is suggesting that this is individuals working for the Justice Department on behalf of Mr. Huber. That this was Huber's people who have gone to this individual whistleblower in regards to things about the Clinton Foundation. And that this is going to be a big breaking story on Monday. Solomon, I'd love to know who his sources are. I'm pretty sure one of his sources is Devin Nunes. But I know he's got some sources in the DOJ, but he gets a lot of things that nobody else gets. And mostly it turns out to be true. He's got some very interesting sources, but you have to be careful because sometimes people who are your sources, if you're in the deep state, can also be used. You can manipulate those people. You can give them some good stuff here and there, but you can also feed them some stuff to send them on a direction where you want them to go, to take them away from anything that they might be getting, onto that might be of real importance. So it can also be used that way as well. You're going to have to pay close attention to what comes out of that before we'll really know what side of the coin we're looking at, because the deep state uses so many smoke and mirrors, it's hard to tell sometimes what is what, who is who, and what is what. You almost always have to wait till you get to the end of the game to unravel it all and find out exactly what was legit and what was disinformation or misinformation. It's very difficult when you're dealing in the deep state multiple layers of smoke and mirrors and things and such. But we'll continue to watch, and I guess we'll all find out together on Monday what Solomon's talking about and who this other whistleblower is. He says it's someone that we've not talked about before. So there has been a lot of breaking news in the last 48 hours and things regarding, that we believe are regarding the Clinton Foundation, pay-for-play, things and such. And what seems unusual to me about all this is that there seems to have been a massive uptick just in the last 2 or 3 weeks or so since Mark Meadows came out and announced that they were going to call Mr. Huber in for a little Q&A. Now, prior to that, and the reason they called him in is because 15 months since Huber was appointed, we have seen nobody indicted, nobody charged. Maybe there's been people who've been forced to go to the grand jury by subpoena, but we're not hearing about it. It appears that nothing's been going on with Mr. Huber. Victoria Tensing, who is the lawyer for Mr. Campbell, William Campbell, who was the confidential informant that has all the stuff, according to Victoria Tensing, just 3 months ago or so when she was on Sean Hannity, Mr. Huber had not even interviewed Mr. Campbell. How could you be doing a thorough investigation of the Clinton Foundation and not even interview the most key witness there is, the inside informant who's got it all? But according to Victoria Tensing, her client, Mr. Campbell, had not been interviewed by Mr. Huber as of about 3 months ago when she did that TV interview with her husband, Mr. DeGeneva, on Fox with Sean Hannity. So all of a sudden, Mark Meadows comes out and says, yeah, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Huber, and I understand it's going to be closed door. And we're going to find out exactly what he's learned in his 15 months of investigation. And after that, all of a sudden we get this rash of strange and curious things, goings on, and these leakings about things having to do with the Clinton Foundation, whistleblowers, and investigations. Things seem to have taken a severe uptick, where before it was just dead silence, total void, nothing. So let's go through some of these things that we're talking about now. So let's first go through the one that's probably the most prominent and which you all have heard of probably, and let's look at the details a little bit on this and see if we can figure out what's going on, because it's not quite clear exactly what is going on. And now in the case of this particular raid, we're not sure who directed this raid. We're not sure if this was Uncle Bob the Executioner, whether this was Huber, or whether this may have been Whittaker or someone else at the DOJ. We're not sure exactly who is behind this, and that would be important to know because that will tell us a lot about the motive for why they did this. But let's look at the event itself and how it went down, and maybe we can get some insight as to maybe who is behind this. So here are the basic facts. There was a raid by the FBI on the Clinton Foundation whistleblower Dennis Nathan Kane. He was in possession of documents pertaining to the Clinton Foundation and Uranium One. Now Kane had turned over, documents to Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz, and then Huckleberry Horowitz, upon receiving these documents from Mr. Kane, sent his investigative people over to both the Senate and House Intelligence Committees and provided them with copies of the documents that were turned over to him by Mr. Kane. It's alleged that these documents show federal officials failed to investigate criminal activity regarding Secretary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, Rosatom, the company that purchased Uranium One, and it's the same guys that were involved in the 10X deal, which of course was run by Uncle Bob the Executioner, who was the head of the FBI at the time, and the case was prosecuted by Rodenstein. And we know that they swept that sucker under the rug. A few light sentences were given. Most people walked. Nobody got any heavy damage, and it was all swept under the rug pretty cleanly. And these things are all connected. The documents also show that FBI Director at the time, Robert Mueller, failed to investigate allegations of criminal misconduct pertaining to Rosatom and other government entities attached to Uranium One. Kane was granted whistleblower status by the Inspector General, but the FBI apparently ignored this. Now, we're not sure if the Obama-appointed judge that approved the warrant was made aware of Kane's whistleblower status. Kane's lawyer, Michael Sikaris, stated that he considered the FBI raid to be an outrageous disregard of whistleblower protections. The FBI claimed that Kane was in possession of stolen documents. It's an interesting way to describe it, especially since the landmark legal case after the Pentagon Papers were released, and they determined that you're just a whistleblower when you do that. And once you have legitimate whistleblower protections, which Mr. Kane did, he was granted whistleblower protections by Horowitz when he turned the documents over to Horowitz. Kane apparently came across these documents while he was working for an FBI as a contractor. So Mr. Kane is not just some guy. He is a guy who works for the FBI as an independent contractor, some sort of investigator of some sort. The FBI called Kane also directly after the raid, bypassing his lawyer. Bypassing a lawyer and speaking directly to the lawyer's client is considered serious misconduct. Both the DOJ and the IG have refused comment. So, we have a lot of questions here. Did the FBI know of Kane's whistleblower status? If they did, then why didn't they inform the judge? Or if they did, why did the judge authorize the warrant? If they did not know, then why not? How is that possible? Did any member of the Senate Intel Committee share documents with the FBI or Mueller? What was the predicate for the raid? Something is definitely going on here. So, who is directing this particular group of FBI agents to conduct this raid? Is this coming from Huber? You got to ask yourself, why would Huber need to conduct this raid? Why would he do it in this fashion? Because it was conducted like the type of raid that you conduct on like a bank robber or someone who's just committed armed robbery or something. Not a whistleblower who actually works for the FBI as some sort of an undercover who he's no longer undercover. His cover's now been blown. Why would you do that? And why would Huber need to do that? This man has turned over the documents to the IG, who Mr. Huber's working with. Why wouldn't he just go to Huber, or why wouldn't he just go to Horowitz and say, hey, that guy that brought in the documents, I'd like to check those out. I'm investigating that Clinton Foundation thing. Both the House and Senate Intelligence Committee have copies. Certainly Mr. Huber could have got a copy at the DOJ. He didn't need to go raid this guy's house and expose him. I mean, the guy obviously will no longer work undercover for the FBI as an investigator. So I'm wondering, why would Huber do that? Doesn't make much sense. Why would Whittaker, if it was Whittaker, why would Whittaker need to do that? He's the acting AG. Horowitz works for him. So if Horowitz has the documents, Whittaker would have access to the documents. Same as Huber. Uncle Bob. Why would Uncle Bob need to do this? Same thing's true. He could get it directly from Horowitz. Is it possible that none of these three knew that this guy had become a whistleblower and gone to the IG? I find it very difficult that you could go to the Inspector General with these documents, this type of stuff, and that the Inspector General would grant you whistleblower status, and that would not be known or made known to the powers that be, the hierarchy of the Department of Justice, because they're the ones that would issue or verify or back up such a status as a whistleblower. Why would Horowitz keep this all to himself? Could he keep it all to himself? This raid on this whistleblower, Dennis Kane, occurred on November the 29th, 2018. Keep in mind that Mr. Kane holds a number of security clearances, including a FISA Section 702 clearance, which includes minimization authority. Most people are believing that this is somehow tied to Huber and his investigation, which would kind of make sense in a way. But you would have to accept the fact that Huber either A, was completely unaware that this individual, Mr. Kane, had already turned this information over to Horowitz, who Huber is supposed to be working with, and that Huber didn't get the message, or that Huber believes that there's additional information Mr. Kane may have, or they wanted to intimidate him and let him know that they consider this stuff pretty seriously and they don't want him leaking it out to anyone else. If it was Uncle Bob, then Uncle Bob would have conducted the raid again as an intimidation tactic, which we know he likes to use, and to get his hands on these documents, to get him out of Mr. Kane's possession so that Mr. Kane cannot pass them on to any Republicans or any media people or whatever. But you would be a fool to think that Mr. Kane doesn't have copies somewhere else. He's a pretty smart guy, works for the FBI, does these sorts of things. He would probably be smart enough. These guys usually don't just keep one copy of it around. They usually, if they have a paper copy of it, they probably got a couple flash drives with that information and safety deposit boxes, or with a friend, or buried under the, in their backyard somewhere. Very strange goings on, my friend, and none of it has aired itself out yet. So I guess we'll all just have to speculate and try to guess what we think. And I really don't know which direction to go on this, but let's take a look at a couple things that have occurred. Keep in mind the date that this occurred, November the 29th. Well, here's 3 other things that happened on November 29th that could be somehow related to all this. On the exact same day, there was a raid on the law offices of Chicago lawyer Edward Burke. Burke is a powerful Chicago lawyer and politician. Burke has been investigated before by the FBI but never indicted. The raid was carried out at his bank with the cooperation from the U.S. Attorney in Chicago. Burke is a huge player in Chicago Democratic Party politics, specifically relating to getting judges appointed to state and federal courts. So the same day that this is all going down with Mr. Kane, we get this raid by the FBI and Mr. Burke, a corrupt Chicago Democrat politician and lawyer. Very well connected type lawyer to high-level Democrats in Chicago. Certainly must know people like Obama, wouldn't you think? The same exact day, we also have a raid on a Dutch bank, Danske Bank. This fell under Dutch bank, Danske Bank, is under investigation by the Department of Justice. But it was Danish authorities which have now filed charges, and the CEO and the chairman of the board have both been forced to resign. They're being looked at for money laundering. This also came as a result of a whistleblower. And this particular whistleblower had described Danske Bank as a multi-billion-dollar laundromat. The same day, Deutsche Bank was also raided by German officials. Deutsche Bank was one of Danske's correspondent banks, as are J.P. Morgan and Chase Bank of America. Also, on November 29th, 3 executives from a defense contractor were indicted for a scheme to defraud the U.S. government on military contracts. Abdul Huda Faruqi was one of the 3 guys indicted. Faruqi's company is a large donor to the Clinton Foundation. The company is based in the United Arab Emirates and is known by its company name is Anham, A-N-H-A-M. Faruqi's Faruqi was previously accused and investigated for sending $8 billion worth of arms to Iran, violating the sanctions. But he was never charged with the crime. This happened during the Obama administration. Also, Anham is a member of this Clinton Global Initiative and a major donator to the Clinton Global Initiative. Mr. Faruqi has also donated to the political campaign of Terry McAuliffe, bagman for the Clintons. He's also been in a photo, pictured in a photo with Huma Abedin, who has close ties, her and her family, to a lot of these high-level people in the UAE. The Comey situation. Well, of course, the biggest thing about the Comey situation, where the judge is supposed to have a ruling on Monday, the thing that amazed me most is that the judge didn't immediately dismiss this. The fact that he even kicked it off until Monday surprised me a great deal, because this is such a ludicrous attempt by Comey to get out of testifying. Should have been an immediate ruling. First of all, the subpoena that he's talking about is a subpoena from Congress, which is a separate and equal branch of government, fulfilling its duties granted by the Constitution. This has not anything to do with a federal case or a civil case being brought by a U.S. attorney or an attorney in a civil case. Comey has an obligation to comply with congressional authorities. There is no precedent whatsoever for this, ever. And again, this was not a subpoena by a court. It was not a civil action. And essentially what Comey's lawyers are asking the judge to do here, and they basically said it in the hearing, is they're asking the judge to basically write a new law, which would literally overpower the constitutional authority of the Congress. An issue like this can only be taken up with the Congress. If the plaintiff is looking for relief, or if the person being questioned or subpoena is looking for relief, the authority is the Congress. He's going to a private court to try to get a private court to make an edict against the Congress, or over the Congress, to the Congress. There's no there's no precedent for anything like that ever being done, where the court imposes something on the Congress that's clearly part of Congress's constitutional authority. That's why I'm surprised that this thing was not laughed out of court. The fact that he even got to wait till Monday. I do believe on Monday the judge will rule against Comey, but the claim is, of course, frivolous, is what it is. It's frivolous. It's Comey trying to buy some time. He's hoping to put this off until, to drag it out until after the Democrats take over Congress, or the House. The attorneys representing Goodlatte's committee describe it as frivolous, and as far as the argument by Comey's attorneys that they're afraid of leaks, and that that the committee is unfairly prejudiced against Comey, are both, again, frivolous claims that have no bearing whatsoever, and defy precedent. Okay, that's all we got time for today. A lot to think about on these two things. We'll probably have to wait a few more days to see what shakes itself out on these issues we just discussed, to find out what's exactly going on here. But there's definitely something going on here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good night. Bye.